Twitter. So this other green button. Okay. I'll start with a quick story about myself. It has a point, and I'll get to it. So you just have to bear with me. But you know, like when I started working on Presto, I actually started at Meta. So it's great to be back at Meta's offices. These are different offices, but you know, same design and everything. So it's good to be back here. You know, when I started at Meta, back at that time, I think it's discontinued, but back at that time, they had a really cool program. It was called Boot Camp. And so Boot Camp, what it allowed you to do was you could join and you could just kind of like pick your team. So what you did was like you just looked through tickets and you just decided what you wanted to work on. And the idea was that like, you know, you want to be paired with a team that, you know, really closely aligns with your interests and passion. So like for the past, you know, few years, I'd, you know, just been working more and more on big data and just kind of like realizing that what I was working on was big data. So like I kind of knew I had that passion. And so I took a gamble. I accepted the offer at Meta. I'm like, they got to have big data problems here at Meta, and they have to have an opening. And luckily I was right, but it took a while. So like, you know, I started with, you know, Cassandra, and, you know, I realized that that's not for me, and there's like a whole bunch of other stuff. And then I found a Presto ticket. And the first one, actually there was like one before that, but the first major one was like I had to write a geospatial function. And that was like really cool because I knew nothing about geospatial functions. I didn't even know that that was a thing. And this was like when PostGIS like came out and people were really starting to use analytics over geometries and maps and stuff like that. So, you know, I read up on it and I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna like bang this out as quick as I can and, you know, just really go head deep into it. And I, you know, was talking with the, you know, at the time, Masha, and, you know, I was ready to submit my PR, and this happened. So like, you know, 77 comments. So before that, you know, I might have had, you know, maybe a dozen or two comments. Like on a bad day, I might have had a dozen, you know, 2 dozen comments. So, you know, I was like, there's a learning curve, but, you know, I can do this, you know, so I'm just gonna stick with it, and, you know, no big deal. So I was like, okay, what else do you got for me? Like, give me something really hard. It wasn't super hard, but I had something else. And then this happened. I had 93 comments. So to say that this wasn't challenging for me, you know, would be a lie. I'm not a monk. I'm not a Zen Buddhist. I, you know, have my own challenges and struggles. But what I realized after talking with my mentor was that, well, it's an open source project and people really care about the code. It's like, it's not about you, it's about consistency with the project, and it's about, you know, people care very, very deeply to the extent where like the littlest things actually are very, very important. And you don't want to kind of like bring your own, too much of your own background to the project. You kind of like want to code as if you're one unit. And so that concept was actually a little foreign to me because I had never really worked with open source projects before. I had open sourced some of my code, but I hadn't really collaborated in an open source project before this project. So I think, you know, I realized something super important, which is that working on Presto, you know, a lot of the folks who work on Presto, it's more than just working on Presto. They have some sort of passion and drive to be a part of that project. And, you know, at least for me, it's really more than just a project. It's really a community and a mission. And we'll talk about the community and mission and, you know, what we're working towards. But I think, like, the bottom line is that it's a lot of folks care very deeply about this project, and that's also why we're all here. So let's talk about, you know, kind of like how we got started. It, you know, started at Meta. At the time called Facebook. So it was, you know, started by Martine, Dane, and David at Facebook back in 2012, open sourced in 2013, and 2019 was a tumultuous year. A bunch of the founders decided to fork, and also we donated the original code to the Linux Foundation, and we had a lot of founding members like Twitter, Alibaba, Uber, and Meta. And today, we're still one of the, you know, kind of like largest query engine, open source query engines out there, and we're continuously evolving the project. I think in like some really, tremendous ways. So let's talk a little bit about that. But what is Presto? So let's talk a little bit about, like what is it? Oh, Presto is a distributed SQL query engine designed for big data. At the time when it was developed, there weren't a whole lot of really good tools where you could query data interactively across a huge data lake. It just didn't exist. And so like at Meta at the time, folks were either using a tool called Peregrine or Hive. And both of those had really unacceptable trade-offs. Peregrine just gave you bad results, and Hive was just unacceptably slow. So Presto was developed to fit that niche where you want to query it fast and interactive, but without having to re-ETL it into a different system. You want to just keep it where it lives. So the querying data where it lives is kind of foundational. You see that through the connector architecture and through our deep integration with systems like Hive, Iceberg, Delta, and so on. So querying data where it lives is a foundational aspect of Presto. What makes it unique? Part of it is the tremendous scale that you can operate Presto at. You can go from really small clusters. People are working on one node clusters now, I think. But you can go from like super tiny clusters all the way to really massive scale data lakes that have thousands of nodes. Some of the hyperscalers that have kind of like are at this conference do really tremendous scale with Presto, and so scale is just like really a foundational part of Presto. It can support all sorts of different workloads now. It was originally designed for interactive queries, but folks use it to save money on batch. People use it for reporting, business intelligence. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use Presto quickly and efficiently. You can query across various different data sources seamlessly. It goes back into the querying data where it lives. It's just kind of like a foundational aspect of Presto's architecture. And the folks who use it are both big and small. It's like some of the biggest data lakes in the world use Presto right now, and also some of the smallest. So it can really kind of like serve your purposes for where you are, and also where you'd like to be. So here we are today, but let's talk about what we're working on in the future. And we can say this kind of like with a pretty high degree of confidence, like what's important for us, what are we working towards, and what's down the pipe. I think the first one is, we've been talking about this for a long time, and we've made a tremendous amount of progress. But I think, one of the things that we're moving toward is all C++ clusters. So we're working on a tremendous project with VLOX and Prestissimo to migrate the native, built-in Java evaluation engine into C++ and unlock some really tremendous performance gains. So this is really all hands on deck. A lot of our slides are talking about the work we've been doing to achieve this. There's still a lot more work to do, but it's definitely good for folks to use right now. Many people are in production with it right now. It's not a journey which is complete, but it's definitely something that it's easily our top priority in the project. We have dozens of people working on this. Pluggable ecosystem. So like Presto's flexibility was really foundation, as I mentioned several times. It was foundational to the design of Presto, and it's also going to continue to be very, very important for its future. If you hear some folks like Pedro, we're talking about a decomposed data lake architecture where like traditional things which were traditionally single process keep on getting split up into smaller and smaller parts. This is happening with Iceberg. Where this is happening with the catalog. This is happening with VLOX and execution engines, which are plugging into existing runtimes. And so like this trend will definitely continue, and I consider us to be pretty much at the forefront of this, and we're going to focus a lot of our energy on integrations because a lot of our code has been moved elsewhere. And then, like I think finally, we want to broaden the use cases, the applicable use cases for Presto. You can use Presto for all of these purposes, but we want to make Presto much more of an OLAP-friendly engine. We don't want to have you to choose between, Starox if you have an OLAP use case. We want that to be done natively in your lake with a lake native format. And we don't want you to have to, use a different tool in case you want to have, you have, that sort of use case. Batch, we already have pretty good batch support with Presto on Spark. We've had Presto on Spark for years, and Presto on Spark can help you to scale to very, very, very large, data sizes reliably using Spark's execution and runtime. And we still have a lot of usage, and we want to firm up batch support. So everywhere between, seconds level OLAP, minutes to hours level batch, and in between, we want Presto to be the primary engine of choice for all of those sorts of things. And the overall goal is, if you have a lake house or a data lake, those are expensive and complicated to operate. If you're a vendor, they're tremendously expensive to build robust support so that you can move warehouse workload into that. And if you're building it on your own, God help you. you need a team of dozens of people. There's a lot of moving parts to that sort of thing. And so, the idea is to make this really, really easy for you and to not have to make so many trade-offs on what tools you need to use. We want you to use Presto for most of those things. To sum up, the future is fast, flexible, and open. And we feel very strongly that, this is the future and that we're we're well prepared for it. So I've been talking about, the software and what we're building, but I think like a product is, of Presto is not just the software itself, but it's the community that builds the software and the community that uses it. So it's not just what we build, but how we build that's extremely important. And so to that end, basically we want to, reiterate that, diversity in any open source project, but especially this project, is extremely important because folks who come from different companies and different backgrounds bring perspectives that you have not considered and you have not thought about. And so it's extremely important to, basically open up this project to anyone who wants to join. To that end, we have lots of different ways to get involved. We have working groups so that you can bring any topic of conversation you would like, if to any one of the major initiatives that we have underway. If you have an idea for the optimizer, just hop into the optimizer working group. If you'd like to see what's going on into the native worker, join the native worker working group. Our core developers all join those meetings. You can just ask away. We, of course, have Slack, GitHub discussions. We tend to be very, very responsive on both of those. If you prefer mailing lists, we have mailing lists for developers, for users. And we also open up our design. So early on in the design process, we try to put major decisions into an RFC. So this is new as of just over a year ago. But we also want to open up our thought process and decision making as early as possible so that people have the opportunity to shape and influence the direction of the project. So, in short, everyone's voice matters. A diverse community is extremely important to us, and this is foundational for us. We think that this is going to make or break the project. We're 100% committed to fostering, basically an inclusive environment and are open for anyone who wants to join. So, we'll get into how at the end, but moving on. So, open source, I think, is one of those things that you can't fake. Just like you can't fake courage, right? You either do something that requires courage or you don't, right? In the same way, you can't fake open source. You're either open or you're not. And so there's different markers to tell, are you an open source project? Are you really an open source project? You would see it in the health of the code. You would see it in the number of contributors who come to the project. So let's take a look at some of these stats. We have a 25% year-over-year increase in the number of commits, 205 new PR submitters, which is a 5% increase. Of those, 178 are actively working on the project, meaning they have several PRs. or at least more than one PR. We had over 26 RFCs over the past year. Not all of those have been accepted, but we have open discussions and designs on 26 different things. So, this is one of those things that anyone can get involved in. It's relatively not hard to just see where the project is going. Just browse the RFCs repository. Over 2,000 different PRs were created, almost 5,000 GitHub stars. And we tend to be extremely responsive if you have a pull request. Our median pull request closing time is 23 hours. You might have a pull request that has taken much longer. This is the median, but we can't, it's one of those things where it's very hard to have a tight SLA around, but I think 23 hours is faster than I get my Amazon packages, so I think that that's pretty decent. And over 80,000 lines of code have changed over the past year. And I think that there's little trophies that can show kind of like the diversity of some of the major things that have happened in the project. So let's just take a look at a few of them. This is the Presto Helm chart actually for C++. So this is what I meant to write. Now you can actually use we've had a Helm chart for over a year, but now we have the ability to deploy C++ clusters with the Presto Helm chart, which is a great way to try out Prestissimo. In case you use Kubernetes. That was done by Denodo. We have an Alibaba Max Compute connector, which was recently contributed. We have the ability to query the Iceberg REST catalog. So if you use Iceberg, you can now use the REST catalog and query things like Unity and Polaris. So that was contributed by IBM, but Denodo also did a recent fix to allow that to work with Unity and things that have nested namespaces. We had quick stat support so that in case you're missing statistics, you can gather them on the fly for Parquet files. We recently firmed up consistency around NANs. Like there's lots of different edge cases, and a lot of our behavior wasn't, had kind of confusing and unexpected results. Meta recently contributed a lot of fixes in that area. Actually, Rebecca did that. We have the Delta kernel support. So now we upgraded our support for Delta Lake, and we use the Delta kernel and have upgraded our version of Delta protocol support to version 3. That was a huge contribution, also done by Denodo. And we can also query branches and tags in Iceberg. And so now you can do like a lot of the, some of the WAP workflows, part of that you can do through Presto now. That was done by Ritika. So thanks everyone who made these contributions. This is, basically thanks everyone to, in Ali's slide that showed all the contributors. Thanks especially to the folks who, contributed these really awesome changes. Let's just keep going. We also had, I think, like a few technical milestones that I think are worthwhile to call out. The first one, I talk a bunch on this on my talk, like I think an hour from now. But we added the Presto sidecar process. We're improving the usability of C++ clusters, closing some of the functional gap that exists between C++ clusters and Java. So this kind of like is the last, in my view, this is kind of like the last leg of, before we can start to push more actively for people to use C++ clusters. So this really closes, I think, is going to close a lot of the usability gap. We added CTE materialization support. So if you use a CTE, you can reference it multiple times, have a huge performance boost. That was done by Uber. We did a lot of work on production readiness for C++. I think we have a talk there, but there were, we spent a lot of time to verify diverse workload on C++, close up some of the function and type support, and then also bring parity between the C++ and Java engine so that you don't have to change too many queries to use the C++ engine. And then also we added Prometheus metrics for C++ so that we have, you can troubleshoot in case something goes wrong on your C++ clusters. So metrics and observability are kind of like very key for running a distributed system. We have support now for basically getting some of those observability metrics so you can troubleshoot when things go wrong. So, I think, one thing to recap is that, really huge companies use Presto, Uber, IBM, Meta, use Presto with tremendous scale. But also, we have, I think, smaller users as well. And I think that goes into the, Presto really can scale with, where you are with your data lake or your analytical needs. So, in my view, Presto is really a key part of your data lake strategy. Like you need an engine and an interface into your data lake. You need something that will scale with, that you won't have to change tools somewhere down the line. I think the usability of Presto and its scalability is really tremendous and speaks to its staying power. I'll end it by just saying, I think, once again, the community of Presto is really, I think, the most important thing about Presto, besides even the software, because the way that you build software is super important. It also tells you its future trajectory. So I'd like to really invite you to join us. You can contribute code. It's not that bad. Not everything, has 90 comments. Many things, just require just a short few. We have tons of GitHub issues in case you'd like to contribute code, and there's also lots of documentation requests, so lots of ways to contribute code. There's plenty of ways to contribute in the community, join a working group, join us in Slack, help folks out in Slack, join our GitHub discussions, lots of different ways to get involved. If you have ideas, bring some of those ideas as GitHub issues, GitHub discussions. There's lots of ways for you to influence and ask for stuff from the Presto project. So, just once again to, reiterate, the future of Presto is basically us. It's us working together. And, we're not, once again, we're not just building a query engine. We're building, our community is, itself, a very, very valuable thing. And let's work together to, really become the future of data analytics over data lakes. So thank you. I'll see you around today at PrestoCon. And, thanks for coming in today.